Namaste. In this video, we will be doing a very small analysis of whether the analytical tools available in software engineering can be used to understand the great epic Ramayana. In general, the programming constructs in software engineering can be done in two ways. One is the traditional way where the program is written as a combination of static elements called data structure which define how the entity will operate and discussing how the action part of the entity should be defined using algorithm. This is the more traditional way of designing a program. In contrast, we have another school of thought called object oriented programming, where all real world objects are defined as an entity called class. Every class will have an identifier by its name, the static properties, which is called as attributes, and the actions performed by that entity, which are defined as member functions. As one can see, there is one-to-one relationship between these two schools of thought. In this discussion, though the focus is more on object-oriented way of designing the software, the same can also be said about the more traditional school of software design. As discussed earlier, in object orientation, the main idea is to define an entity called class. The class will have name, the behavior, and the attributes. In a complete object oriented system, the classes are defined, responsibilities are assigned for the class, and collaborators, that is, how different classes interact with each other, is defined. So, classes, responsibilities of classes, and collaborators together define a holistic system which put together can be understood as how a world operates. Once such a design is complete, it is evaluated using the 8 design principles of object orientation. The 5 main principles of object orientation are well known as the solid principles: single responsibility, open close, Liskov substitution, interface segregation, and dependency inversion. Plus, there are concepts of coupling and cohesion. Also, there is a guideline of doing the design using the most generic models. So, put together, these 5 plus 3, 8 design principles govern the world of object orientation. So once a system is designed using classes, responsibilities, and collaborators, how good the design is, it is evaluated using these 8 principles. It is this analytical framework that we'll be using in this discussion to understand Ramayana. So, what we will do is try to understand the basic class of perfect human as described in Ramayana, because essentially Ramayana came up as an answer to this very basic question by Valmiki. Valmiki asked Narada, who is the perfect human being? Is there a perfect human being in the current times in the world? That was a question asked by Valmiki, for which Narada gave an answer in the form of Ramayana. The story of Ramayana is essentially the story of a perfect human being. So, we can set a goal for ourselves to define a class called perfect human being. The 16 attributes which are asked by Valmiki to Narada will become the attributes of the class, and the actions performed by each individual characters they become the behavior. So, in other terms, what Valmiki asked was he was trying to define a class. What Narada did in turn, he instantiated this class into an object called Rama. So, Ramayana can be understood as this system wherein a class called perfect human was defined, and later Rama became an instance of this class. So, what we need to understand is the 16 attributes as listed by Valmiki, and then we should see how these 16 attributes get different values in this object called Rama. Therefore, while we are discussing the actions of Rama, it becomes imperative for us that we should give a justification for these actions only based on the values of the 16 attributes which are part of this class. Many people do this basic mistake of either glorifying Rama or ridiculing Rama without understanding this basic concept that Rama is an embodiment of 16 attributes which were first defined by Valmiki and later elaborated by Narada. So, the central theme of Ramayana essentially is the 16 attributes. As Nicholas Worth rightly said, in a perfect program, half of your job is done if you define very good data structure. The data structure part or the attributes are the 16 attributes which are defined by Valmiki, and we will be doing a good service to the work of studying Ramayana and for a general cause of understanding how good a human should be by doing a detailed study of these 16 attributes. So we'll understand that our main purpose now is to define a class called perfect human being that has 16 attributes. Now these are the 16 attributes which are listed here. Let me recite the actual shlokas as mentioned in Valmiki's Ramayana, where all these 16 attributes are listed. The shlokas goes like this. कोन्वर्स्मि साम्प्रतं लोके गुणवान् कश्च वीर्यवान् धर्मज्ञश्च कृतज्ञश्च सत्यवाक्यो दृढव्रतः चारित्रेण च को युक्तः सर्वभूतेषु को हितः विद्वान् कः कः समर्थश्च कश्चैकप्रियदर्शन आत्मवाङ्को चितक्रोधो द्युतिमाङ्को अनुसूयकः यस्य बिभ्यति देवश्च जातरोषस्य संयुगे. So Valmiki was essentially asking Narada whether there is any human being who is an embodiment of these 16 attributes. In response, Narada told the story of Rama. Now let us try to understand each of these 16 attributes in detail, because as we saw earlier, understanding the 16 attributes becomes very essential for us to describe this important class called perfect human being, whose instance is Rama. So if you have to understand Rama correctly, then you should understand the meaning of each of these 16 different attributes. The first attribute is Gunavan. One of the main problems in understanding these attributes is because we use these terms in our normal conversation and with tradition, we have attached some simple meaning to these words. Therefore, we tend to believe that the meaning which we know is the actual meaning for that word. Therefore, sometimes we do mistakes by omission or by creation of our own imagination as to what each word should mean. Therefore, in this discussion, we will take each word and see all possible meanings of that word and make a sense of what is the most relevant meaning that we should take for that particular attribute. The problem becomes very clear when we discuss Gunavan, because that means a person who has guna. Now, the first question that anybody can ask is, since there is already a listing of 16 characters or gunas, why a separate listing called Gunavan should be done? Aren't all these gunas in themselves? And is there something special which can be called as guna? Because guna means character. Character definitely here can mean good behavior. So doesn't Gunavan means good behavior, which encompasses all the things which are listed here? Well, that is what we will see. Gunavan definitely means good character, but it also means the most intrinsic quality of an individual, which will make that person unique from others. So, among all the qualities that an individual possesses, which is the dominant inherent quality in an individual, which separates that person from others, which makes him unique, is what is called as guna. Now, instantly, students of software engineering will identify that while discussing a class, we need a unique identifier for the class. Or if you're discussing database design, the same concept is called as key, then super key. In any way, in any computing system, we need a unique identifier for an entity. Similarly, for an individual, that characteristic which uniquely identifies him, which is dominant in nature, that is called guna. And also, in Indian philosophy, there are three strains of gunas which are identified. They are very popular, and most of them would know it as sattva, rajas, and tamas. It is a misconception that an individual can only have either of these gunas. It is practically not possible. Every individual will have some shade of sattva, some shade of rajas, and some shade of tamas. Now, what proportion of these three each individual has will determine his distinct character. So, that is the meaning of guna. Also, very interestingly, in Paninian grammar, there is the concept of guna sandhi, that is the way of combining two different letters. Very interestingly, combining a plus u to make it o is a part of guna sandhi. A plus u making it o. Now, how it is relevant to us? Well, the most important sound in Indian philosophy, the most important symbol is Om. Then you will understand why Gunasandhi and how Ramayana and how the spirituality of Ramayana are interlinked to each other. One more very interesting context in which the word guna is used is in Indian mathematics system called Bija Ganita, which is algebra. There, the process of multiplication is called as guna. What is multiplication? It is adding an entity to itself for a particular number of times. Now, how is it relevant? Well, we'll see this at the end of this discussion, but we'll remember that guna also means multiplication. There are two other very interesting meaning for this word. One is the single string. The single string used to tie both sides of a bow together is also called guna. Very interestingly, One of the characteristics which we will define later, which is called dharma, refers to bow. If dharma is the bow, then guna is that string which keeps that dharma together, both sides of the dharma together. Or in some other context, we can also say that guna is that quality which keeps all the 15 other characteristics together. There are 16 attributes defined for a perfect human being. The single thread which binds them together is what is called as guna. Very interestingly, the person who cooks the food is also called as guna. How is it related to Ramayana? Well, that's a discussion for another day. The second attribute is Viryavan, generally translated as man who has courage, courageous fellow. So the standard definition is a person who defeats enemies, who is known for his bravery in the war field, that is Viryavan. But there is one more hidden and very subtle but important meaning for this word. That is, yes, he should defeat the enemies in war, but he should not get injured. So he should cause injuries to others, defeat them, but he should not get injured. What is the meaning? Well, if you look at the spiritual context of it, the Arishadvargas, which are the main enemies of humans, one should conquer that, but while doing that, one should not be so much affected by the fact that you are controlling those emotions. Let me elaborate. Say, for example, you are a diabetic patient, then you will not be allowed to eat sweets. You may control your urge not to eat sweet, but if you keep telling yourself that, oh, I am not allowed to eat the sweet, if that regret is in your mind, then capturing that emotion does not make sense. So, what Viryavan actually means is you should control the emotion, but while doing so, you should not regret doing that. You should remain unaffected by the fact that you are controlling the emotions. That is the true meaning of this word called Viryavan, which is the second attribute among the 16 attributes. The next is Dharmajna, which means he who is practitioner of Dharma. Dharma is a very complex term in Bharatiya philosophy which cannot be easily translated into single word, especially in English. But for the sake of the discussion, let us have this practical definition. Dharma, let us say, is a way of life, or more specifically, when you encounter a problem, the course of action that you take is what should be called as dharma. How do you decide the right answers for the question that you face in your life? That we can say is dharma. So now if you encounter a problem in life, how do you find a solution? Where do you find the solution for it? First is what is called as Aptavakya. That is either the written or spoken words of elders, which you take as pramana. You unquestioningly you accept that. So if you find a problem and there is a ready-made solution out there which is given by people whom you respect, you take that and follow. Or you see what elders have done, what people you have, that is not written anywhere, but they have followed something, there is a precedence. You answer your questions according to that precedence. Or you yourself do the analysis based on the first principles and derive at some conclusion. So there are three ways you can answer a question. Either go for Aptavakya, that is, see what elders have told about this, either in the written form or as a matter of practice, tradition. Or second is through their precedents what they have done, or thirdly, doing an individual analysis. Through this, you have to establish what is called a swadharma, that is the right course of action for oneself, which in turn doesn't mean that you have to hurt someone else's feeling. Swadharma should not come in contrast, in clash to someone else's belief system. That is not the point here, but understanding the right course of action for self. That is Dharmajna. In fact, going back to software engineering, it looks like it is not coincidental that Gunavan, Viryavan, and Dharmajna has come in this order. There seems to be some logical connection between these three. Dharma is the practical aspect, Guna is the internal attribute, Viryavan is that synthesis factor between the two. That is, your internal attribute, your most inherent quality, gets filtered out and results in action. That is what these three means. In a very straightforward manner, anybody can understand that this corresponds to the three-tier architecture in software engineering, where dharma will correspond to the outwardly action. In software engineering, we call it user experience. Gunavan is the most intrinsic aspect. In software engineering, we call it data design. Viryavan is the synthesis part. Through algorithm, this can be the logic layer, the business layer, middle tier. The classic MVC framework is what we are referring here, which refers to Gunavan, Viryavan, Dharmajna layering. So, it looks like this is not coincidental. As we have seen earlier, Gunavan is the unique identifier for the object, builds upon Viryavan, and then goes to Dharmajna, which is the action part. Very interesting indeed as to how these two separate schools of knowledge, philosophy on one hand, technology on the other, tradition and technology, both are talking to each other on the same terms. Ekam sat vipra bahuda vadanti. Truth is same. People talk about it in different ways. How true? Well, we'll continue our discussion about the attributes. The next attribute that we'll see is Kritajna, the fourth attribute. This is normally translated as acknowledging the help received by others. Very straightforward meaning, gratitude. But that is not the only meaning again of the word Kritajna. It also means underplaying the help that you provide to others. So there are two aspects. If you receive help from someone, you be magnanimous to acknowledge it. But when you help somebody, make it a low-key affair. A person who does both of this is called Kritajna. Next is Satyavaak. Very complex again, because Satyavaak means the one who speaks truth. It poses the most important philosophical question as to what is truth, what is Satya. It's a very difficult discussion to have, but for our practical understanding, let us take a very small shloka from Manusmriti. It says, Satyam bruyat priyam bruyat, na bruyat satyam apriyam. Priyam chanandritam bruyat, sadesha dharmaha sanatanaha. Speak truth, but speak truth in a pleasant manner. That is because most of them say that truth is bitter. It has to be told in a straightforward manner. It's okay if you get hurt while speaking the truth because truth hits you hard. These are the common statements which people make. In Bharatiya philosophy, something in contrast is said. We believe that truth has to be said, but it has to be said in a very pleasant manner. If you cannot say truth in a pleasant manner, they say you better don't say the truth at all. On the contrary, if saying untrue things make people comfortable, don't even say that. So, you have to tell the truth, but in a very pleasing manner. So Satyavaak is the person who doesn't tell you the truth on your face. He is a person who takes a pleasant route to make you realize the truth. He is Satyavaak. Next attribute is Dridhavrata, one who is firm on the decision taken. That is a straightforward meaning. That is, he will give a promise, he will be forthcoming in giving a promise, but he will take all the steps to fulfill the promise also. It is not simply giving an empty promise. The, the problem here is, what if you give promises to different people which are conflicting in nature? Then how do you resolve it? Because you have to, as a Dridhavrata, you have to fulfill your promise. Now the case is you have given multiple promises to people and they're conflicting with each other. Then how do we resolve? You have to resolve it on the principles of dharma. Prioritize the promises and fulfill those promises which are of the higher order. The person who can do this in a very pleasing manner is called as Dridhavrata. Charitrya is the next attribute, which roughly translates to character, but we will call it as good conduct. Behaving well when times are good is easy, but how does one behave? As Tulsidas says, धीरज धर्म मित्र और नारी परकिए आपत्काल में परकिए चारी. So one's character is tested in difficult times. How does one behave during difficult times? How does he respond to the conflict? That speaks about the character of an individual. The next attribute is Sarvabhutahita. That is the utilitarian principle of acting in such a way to bring maximum happiness to maximum people. Behaving to make friends happy is easy. Behaving to bring happiness to family is easy. But can you be good towards your enemies also? That is a question. Being good to humans is easy. But can you be good to animals, birds, and trees too? That is a question to ask. Sarva Bhuta Hita means somebody who brings happiness, whose actions bring happiness, not only to living beings, but also to non living entities. His actions bring happiness to everybody. That person is called Sarva Bhuta Hita. Next is Vidwan. All knowing is the straightforward meaning. But to elaborate, let us say Vidwan is the person who has the theoretical knowledge. In Bharatiya tradition, we call it Shastra. So he should be having the knowledge of Dharma Shastra, Artha Shastra, Kama Shastra, and Moksha Shastra. That is main Vidyas and Upavidyas. Plus, he should be having knowledge about the Shastras. In general, he should be having the theoretical knowledge and he should also have a knowledge of how and when to practice it. It is very important not only to know but also to know how and where to use it. That judgmental aspect is what is called as Vidwan. Very interesting attribute next is Samartha. Very loosely used word today, but the word Samartha means the person who is most suitable to do the job because he alone is different from others. He alone has those qualities, all the faculties to take up some task which nobody else can. Not only taking up the task, but he can also collect the resources required to complete the task. Resources here meaning human power or material resource. So that person who can take up a task and complete it with the possible resources that he can collect, that person is called Samartha. The actual word for leader in Indian context is Samartha. So, who is a good leader? A good leader is the right man for the job, but he does that by using the resources at his disposition. That guy is called as Samartha. Next is Priyadarshana, roughly translates to whose appearance makes people happy. If the mere appearance of somebody makes somebody happy, everyone happy, that quality is called as Priyadarshana. Now it is very easy to appear good to family and friends, but can somebody's appearance make enemies also happy? Priyadarshana is a title given to that person whose appearance makes even enemies happy. That person is called Priyadarshana. Also, we should understand that this does not correspond to any physical trait. A person may be physically beautiful or not, that doesn't matter to us. If we like him, then he will look beautiful for us. How does one look beautiful? How do you like somebody? The earlier attributes that we have discussed. That is, if somebody is Kritajna, that he is acknowledging the help done by others, and Sarvabhuta Hita, that is, he is most forthcoming to help others, then such a person is someone you look for meeting to. Then he becomes Priyadarshana. Not only the physical attractiveness, but whose character is such that the very name brings happiness. Next is Atmavan, very spiritual in meaning, because Atmavan means the person who has the self realization. The ultimate goal of Bharatiya traditions is to realize our true selves. The person who has realized that is called Atmavan, but in more realistic term, somebody who has conquered himself is supposed to get the mystic yogic powers, Anima, Mahima, Garima, Lagima, and such 8 powers. Anybody who has such 8 powers is also called as Atmavan. Anima, Mahima, Garima, Lagima means the ability to make your body large, make your body small, make it weight nothing, or make it more heavy, things like that. These kind of yogic powers, if somebody attains, those people are called Atmavan. The next attribute is Jitakrodha, somebody who has one anger. If somebody has one anger, he has a victory over anger, doesn't mean that he will never be angry. That is not the intended meaning here. The intended meaning here is he has a very good protocol for anger management. That means there is one more attribute which is discussed later. We'll take it up here. It is called Jata Rosha. Yasya Bibhyati Jata Roshasya Samyuge. In war, if he becomes angry, even Devas fear him. That is what is the question asked by Valmiki. So, Jitakrodha does not mean somebody who doesn't get angry, but somebody who knows when to get angry. And he uses his anger for the right end. That is called Jitakrodha. The next attribute is Dyutiman. Essentially means Kanti, the brightness which is emitting from that person, which makes that person attractive. But like other attributes, there is one more hidden meaning here, which is light. Very interesting meaning because it is light which makes us look at the things. Just because we have eyes, we can't see anything. When light reflects on our eyes, because light falls on an object and those objects form electromagnetic radiation into our eyes, we can see them. So, how do we see something is not because we have eyes, it is because there is light. If there is no light, even if we have eyes, we can't see anything. So Dyutiman doesn't represent only the physical characteristic of outwardly appearance. It means something more. Dyutiman means that light which makes us think visible, which brings out the true meaning of the entities. That is Dyutiman. Anusuyakaha, that means somebody who doesn't have asuya. What does it mean? Anusuya means one straightforward meaning is that person who can celebrate other success, who can be part of other success. He doesn't have asuya, the jealous if somebody does achieve something. He is more forthcoming in participating in the celebration of others. That is the more straightforward meaning, non-jealous, anusuyakaha. But there is one more meaning, that is not finding small little faults in something which is magnanimous. Both meanings hold good for Anusuyaka. So Anusuyaka is a person who is not jealous about others and who doesn't find fault, small faults in big achievements of people. So in nutshell, we have seen 16 attributes in great detail. It can be classified in many ways. Here, I have done the classification according to physical attributes, behavioral attributes, and the spiritual attributes. Various other kinds of classification can also be done. But let us remember that we had started out to create this class. So our job now is to create a class. Before we go to that, let us take some time to just understand the significance of this 16. It looks that it is not coincidental that Valmiki has selected 16 attributes. You may remember that Ashtakshari mantra is the mantra for Narayana, whose incarnation is Rama. Ashtakshari is 8. Multiple of 8 is 16. And you may recall that while discussing the characteristic guna, we said guna stands for multiplier. You can see that multiplying effect here in 16. So you can start with 1, Ekam Sat, one and only one God. Keep adding that and you will reach 16. Surprisingly, Valmiki asked whether somebody has 16 qualities, the perfect human. Narada in his reply listed 64 quality, again a multiple of 16. Coincidentally, Ramayana has 24,000 shlokas, also a multiple of 8. 8 seems to be the central character here. Well, it may be stretching too much, but 8, if you turn 8 to 90 degrees, you can see that the symbol for 8 in Indo-Arabic numerical system corresponds to infinity, which is an attribute which Indian philosophy and most of the philosophy gives to God. It may be a too long stretched argument, but because we are discussing the beauty of 8, that may be a part of our discussion. Coming back to our original point of how can we relate the concept of Ramayana to the principles of software engineering, we are right now here. We have discussed the 16 attributes of the perfect human being. Now we have to instantiate this class and create an object called Rama. We now understand the 16 attributes. What values we subscribe to these 16 attributes is the exercise left. So we'll have to assign the values for these 16 attributes and to what degree we give these values. That has to be discussed. Then you take the most important activities in Rama's life and then try to explain those activities by using these attributes, or in other words, elaborate these functions by using these attributes. If that is complete, then we'll get a coherent understanding of the character of Rama. And to use the object oriented language, once we have defined the object of Rama, the same activity can be continued to define the various other characters in Ramayana. Then we can create an object oriented system. We have classes, the responsibilities of classes are defined. We can see how they can collaborate and then use the eight principles, coincidentally, eight design principles of object orientation, that is the solid principles, coupling, cohesion, and general programming. Totally eight principles of object orientation to evaluate such a design. This requires much more indulgement from our part in reading and understanding Ramayana as well as software engineering. I hope that this rather long discussion may have made you interested in exploring more on this topic. Om Tat Sat.